Welcome to the 11th video in this tutorial series on building an e-commerce website using React, Redux, GraphQL, and Firebase. Now in today's video, we're going to be building our admin dashboard. We're going to be working on building out the functionality to enable an admin to manage products. Now please check out my official YouTube channel, that's youtube.com/simpletut, not only to find my other videos, but please check out the official playlist for this series. I also want to ask you guys to check out the official Github repository for this project. Again, I'll be posting links to all of these within the description of this video. Our official website is simpletut.com, but the most important thing I want to ask you guys to do is like, comment, and subscribe. Now in preparation for this tutorial, I've managed it a little bit differently. I've already built the UI for our admin dashboard, and I've also built the form that we'll be using to actually handle creating new products in our database. Now the reason that I've done that is for two reasons. The first reason is that I'm very aware that if I was going to build what is quite a complex UI here within the tutorial, I believe that the video would become too long, and also I would end up focusing a little bit too much on just building out the UI, when really what I want to focus on is the logic behind it that actually, as I said, interacts with the APIs and handles the data. The second reason is that all of the code that I'm writing in this tutorial is available in the repository for this project. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is just walk through the components that I've written to build my admin dashboard. So the first thing that I've done is I've created two new layout components. Now, if you have watched previous videos in this tutorial series, then you will be more familiar with the architecture of our current project. But just to show you that in the code, this is our source directory. We have layout components. And I've created these two new layout components, one for my admin dashboard and one for the standard users dashboard. Now these layouts components are used within our routes, which we have in our app.js. So I import these layouts at the top of the file, and then for the routes, for example, our admin route, I'm simply using this layout component to wrap my page component. So let's have a look at my admin layout. Let's actually take a look at this in the browser, so you guys can envision this a bit more. So as you can see, this is my admin layout, and all it really has is a left-hand side vertical nav and this main content area with this option to toggle and add new product form. So if we look at this in the code, let's come over to our admin layout. And as you can see here, I have my header and my footer, but in between this, I have two divs, one for my vertical nav and one for the main content. And of course, the main content is actually just coming from the admin page component. So if we look at that in our route, this is our layout. We're passing a nested component here, which is our admin page component. And I'm going to show you that in a second. But let's just return to our layout. So the main thing that you'll see here is that I've added a vertical nav component. And this is a new component that I've created. And all it allows me to do is just pass an unordered list with two links, right? So I have a link that just returns them to the home page of our admin, and I also have a link to log out. Now if we actually look at the vertical nav component, so I'll just come over here. All I'm doing here is I'm rendering the unordered list that I passed to this component, and I've styled that already within the CSS for the vertical nav. But the other thing that I'm doing is I'm actually getting the current user from our Redux store, and I'm passing that to a user profile component. And if we look at this in the browser, all that it does is it just renders the user's name, the user that is logged in, and just an icon for a user profile image. And currently I've just defaulted that to this image here. And this is the default image that I've used for that. Let's take a look at our add new product form. Now this is actually a very simple form. All it has is a category select for men and women's. As I will show you in a moment, those are hard-coded options. Now you can extend those options, you can make them dynamic. It's completely up to you. But for this tutorial, I've just hard-coded these two. It also has a product name field. You can enter the URL for a thumbnail, and you can enter a price. Now, this of course is coming from our admin page component. Now, it's really important that you guys understand how our pages and our layouts work. And again, this would help if you had, and again, it would help a lot if you guys had watched the other videos in this series. But the way that it works is, of course, if we look at our route, we're using our admin layout and we're wrapping that around our page component. So within our admin layout component, we are rendering the component passed to it, and in this case it is our admin page component. And all our admin page component has is we've used our form button component that we created in an earlier video to create our toggle button. And this just toggles a Boolean value we store in state to display a pop-up. And we do have a pop-up component. I've created a modal component. And this just toggles whatever we pass to it based on the value that we're toggling here. And this just contains our form. So the form fields that we need is just a category select, which I'll show you in a second, a product name, a main image URL, and a price, as well as a button, a submit button. Now this form select, now if I show you that in the browser, it just allows us to select the category that we'll be adding a new product for. Now at the moment, I've hard-coded two options, one for men and one for women's. And again, if you come back over to the code, you'll see that this is just hard-coded. Now you can extend this, you can add more options, you can make these options dynamic. It's completely up to you. But for the purposes of this tutorial and this series, we are only going to have two options, and I've just hard-coded them here. Now, in terms of the other input fields that we have, these are form components that we created in an earlier video in this series, and you can see them by going to the components folder, forms. We have a form input and a form button component, and those are the components that we're using here, and they just render the input field with the props that we're passing. Now, the only additional form component I created for this tutorial was a form select. And of course, this is just an option, a drop down that is passed. And you guys can easily create this on your own. It's just a standard form select field. And in the same way that we handle the change event, I'm passing the handle change function here too, which updates the state on our parent component. And of course here, as you can see, I'm just mapping through the options that are being passed to our form select. And I'm passing them again, as I mentioned before, I'm passing them here in the props. Okay, so let's get started. Now, I'm going to assume that you guys have already created the same form that I'm going to be working with, and that is our add new product form. You guys already know the fields that it requires, and at the moment this form doesn't actually do anything. If I click add product, it doesn't submit, it doesn't handle any of the data we enter into this form. So that's the first thing that we're going to fix. We want to actually allow the user to enter information into this form and then actually add that product to our database. So to do that, we need to come back over to our text editor, and let's take a look at our form. So that form is inside of our page component within our admin. And as you can see, when this form is submitted, on the onSubmit event, we call an onSubmit function, and we have access to all the values in that form here because we store it within the state, the local state within our admin page component. So within our handle submit function, we want to be able to actually dispatch an action that will handle this event. But at the moment, we don't have any action to do that. So of course, we need to go ahead and create that action. So to do that, I'm going to come into my Redux folder, and I'm going to create a new folder for my product state. So I'm just going to call this products. And we're going to need to create a number of files within our products folder, right? So the first one is going to be products types.js, and we're going to define our types within this file. Now, I already know the types that we're going to need to create, so I'm going to create a const called products types.js, which is an object that is going to contain our types. And we're going to export this by default. We're going to export product types. So as you guys know, the first thing that we want to do is we want to add a new product. So I need to add product type. So I'm going to call this add new product start. And it's going to contain the same value, which is a string, as the name of the key. And I'm going to save that. Now, of course, we need an action that we can dispatch. So within the products folder, I'm going to create another file called products.actions.js. And inside of this file, I'm going to import at the very top my products types. And I'm going to import that from the file I created called product types. Okay, so we need to, first of all, create an action that we can dispatch from within our component. So to do that, I'm just going to export const, and this is going to be our action. So it's going to be add product start. And this is just going to take the product data, and then it's just going to return a simple action object, which is going to have a type, which is going to be product types dot add product start, and the payload of this will simply be the product data that we pass to it. Okay, so now that we have our action, we can use this inside of our admin component. So looking at our form, and on the onSubmit event of this form, we call the handle submit function, where we can actually dispatch our action. So to do that, we need to import a couple of things. So the first thing we need to import is from React Redux, which is the use dispatch hook. We'll need to have access to dispatch within the component. So we'll say const dispatch equals use dispatch and call that as a function. But of course, we also need the action itself before we can dispatch it. So at the top of the file, I'm also going to import from my Redux folder, products, and my products actions. And I'm going to import that add product start action we just created. And I'll be able to dispatch that within my handle submit function by calling dispatch and dispatching the action directly. But of course, we need to pass a payload with this action, and the value that that will contain is all that we have in our local state. So if we look at our form components on the handle change event, we're using the update function from use state to update our local state with the value of the form field. So whenever a user enters a value in the form field, we're updating our local state with the values from the form. So I can take these values and pass that in my payload. So of course that's going to include our product category, our product name, our product thumbnail, and our product price. So this is now going to be the payload that we submit with this action. Now, of course, we're using Redux Saga. So in my products folder, I'm also going to have to create another new file called products.sagas.js. And within this file, we need to import a few things so that we can handle this action. So the first thing I need to do is import some effects from Redux Saga. So from Redux Saga effects, we need to import take latest, put, all, and call. Now, again, if you watched other videos, you guys will be very familiar with what those are, but if not, I'm going to explain them in just a moment. So we also need to import our products types that we created a few moments ago. We need to import that from our product types. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to actually listen for this action whenever this gets dispatched, right? Add product start. We need to listen for that, because the way that Redux Saga works is whenever an action gets dispatched, it will intercept that action, it will handle some asynchronous event, and then it will dispatch another action with a payload to update the Redux store. It just gives us more control over the asynchronous code within our React Redux ecosystem. So again, let's just work on the code and I'll explain it more as we go. But again, if you watch other videos in this series, you guys will already have a strong grasp of what that is. So let's create that. So what we need to do is export our generator function, which we're going to call on add product start, right? And all this is going to do is yield take latest, and we want to first of all pass the action type that we are that we're listening for, and then it needs another generator function that's actually going to handle this asynchronously. So we'll create another we'll create another generator function, which we're just going to call add product, right? And this will receive the entire payload of the action, but from that payload, we want to destructure all the values that we were previously passing when we dispatched the action originally, right? So let's fix the indentation. Now I'm going to come back to this function in just a few moments, but first of all, what we need to do is we need to pass that to our take latest. Now, before I actually write my add product saga, I need to export my products sagas so that they can be used within my root saga. So if you remember, this is my root saga, and this is what we're passing to our Redux store. If we look at our create store, we import our root saga here, and of course this is where we actually pass it to our Redux store. So if I didn't export my sagas in this way, then Redux wouldn't be aware of them. So it wouldn't actually, we wouldn't be able to intercept the actions when they get dispatched within our Redux store. So that's how it works. So at the bottom of the file, we need to export our sagas from this file. So to do that, we simply say export default. We need to create a generator function here. We're going to call it products sagas. And all it's going to do is yield all. And this is another effect we're importing here. So we say all, and we pass an array where we call our generator functions here, our start generator functions. So I only need to export my add product start generator function, and the only reason I have to export this one is because it actually calls the add product generator function. So I don't need to worry about exporting add product. So now that I exported this, all I have to do to include it within my Redux store is just come over to my root sagas file and import that. So I'll import that under my user sagas import. So I'll say products sagas from products sagas, and then in the same way as I did before, I simply add a comma, call, and pass my product sagas. So we can save that, and now any of the sagas that I export from my products sagas file will be passed to the Redux store. Okay, so we're now ready to work on our add product generator function. Now there are a number of ways that you can handle your asynchronous code with something like Redux Saga. The pattern that we've adopted is we actually use helper functions and we resolve a promise. So what I'll do is I'm going to create a try catch within my add product generator function. So here we'll be able to catch any errors. And what I'll do by default is I will just log out the error, but for now I'm going to comment it out. But as I said, we need a helper function. So I'm going to create a new file within my products directory called products.helpers.js. And within this file, I'm going to be able to import my Firestore. And this is something I exported from my Firebase utils. So I'll be able to import my Firestore. And again, if you look at the utility file we created, this is a file we created in an earlier video of this series. So if you guys watched that, you'll be familiar. But one of the things we export from the file is our Firestore. And then, as I said, we need to create a helper function. So I'm going to call this const, and we'll need to export this, but we'll say const handle add product. And what this is going to take is the product that we want to create, so the product itself. And then what we'll be able to do is return a new promise. And of course that takes resolve and reject. And then what we'll do is we'll use Firestore. And the first thing we want to do is we want to say firestore.collection. We want to look for the products collection. And then we want to create a new document. And then we want to set the values of this document to the values we pass here, which is the product. Now, of course, what we can then do is we can use the then callback. And if this succeeds, what we'll be able to do is resolve this promise. However, if we catch an error, right, then of course what we can do is we can reject and pass the error. Right. So now what we can do is we can take this helper function, come back over to our product sagas. We'll need to import the helper function we just created. So we'll import from products helpers, and we want to import handle add product. And then within our try catch of our add product generator function, we'll say yield handle add product. And this is where we're going to set the fields that we want to add to our products document. So I'm going to take all the values that we destructured from the payload, but I also want to add 2 additional fields, right? So the first additional field I'm going to add is the ID of the admin that is currently logged into the application and is adding this product, right? So I'm going to call this product admin user ID, right? Actually, it's going to be UID. And to get that, at the top of our file, we need to import something else. So I'm going to import from, again, our Firebase utils file. I want to import auth. And what I'll be able to do here is say auth.currentUser.uid. And this is going to give me the UID of the logged in user. And then what I'll do is simply add the created date. So to do that, just at the top of the try, I'm going to create a new const called timestamp. And this is just going to equal a new date. And I'm going to pass that here. So I'll create another key called created date and just pass the timestamp. So this is actually going to add new product to our database, right? And again, just to show you guys, if I come back over to my Firebase database, you can see there's currently no products collection. So let's come back over now to our application. Let's fill in this form and let's enter a random name. So let's just say it's a nice bag. We have a URL to an image, and let's just set the price to something like £10, right? Now let's add the product. And as you can see, I now have a products collection. We've created a new document, and all the values that was entered into the form are now stored in the products collection. So now that we're actually adding these products to our database, we need a way of actually rendering them out on our dashboard, right? So to do that, we need to come back over to our code, and we need to head over to our products types. We need to add two new types. The first one is just going to be fetch products start. Again, this is just going to take the same value as the name of the key. And then we need a way of actually storing these in our Redux store. So I'm going to call this set products, right? And again, that's just going to have the same value as the name of the key. Now, currently, we haven't created our products reducer. So to do that, within my products file folder, I'm going to create a new file called products.reducer.js. Now, the first thing that we need to do is we need to import our product types. We can import that from our product types file. And then we need to actually create the reducer itself. So we'll say const products reducer equals function. We're going to pass in some initial state. So we'll say state equals, we need to create the initial state. So we'll say const initial state. It's just going to be an object with products, which is going to be an empty array. We'll pass that as the default state, and it's going to take some action. This is going to return a switch function, which will take the action dot payload, the action dot type, and then based on that we'll return the state, but the default case is just going to return the state that was given to it. And of course, we need to make sure that we're exporting this, so we'll export default the products reducer. So the only case that we're actually going to need to have in this products reducer, at least for now, is going to be the case for case product types dot set products. So this is where we actually return the state, but we actually set the product. So we'll say product equals the action dot payload. So this is where we are actually able to set the products. Now, in the same way that we updated our root Saga, we need to update our root reducer with our new products state. So what we'll do is we'll import our products reducer. We'll import that from our new file. So we have products and our products reducer. And we're going to call this state our products data. and it's just going to equal our products reducer. So that's all we need to do there. Now, although we've created these two new types, we need to create the corresponding actions for them. So within my actions file, I'm going to create two new actions, right? So the first is going to be to dispatch the fetch start type. So we'll say export const fetch products start, and this is just going to return an object with a type, which will be products types dot fetch products start. And of course, we also need another action to set the products. So we'll say export const set products, which is going to take products and it's going to return a type, which will be products types dot set products with a payload of the products we passed to this function. Now, within our admin page component, we want to do two things. We want to dispatch an action whenever the component mounts that will fetch the products. And then we want to also subscribe to the products and the Redux store in the Redux store so that we can access that state and render the actual products out on the page. So to do that, what we're going to do is import at the top of the file this use effect hook, right? And then what we'll be able to do is within this component itself, we're going to use the use effect hook, which takes two things. One is a function, and the second is an array of dependencies. So what we want to do is the same way we imported our add products start action, we want to import fetch products start. Now this doesn't expect anything, all right? So we can just dispatch this. We don't have to pass anything here. And this is going to dispatch the action that will be used to that will be used within our Saga to actually fetch the products. Now, I want to note here that I'm not passing any dependencies, but I'm still defining an empty array. The reason that I do that is that it ensures that this only runs on that first initial render of the component. If I didn't pass this empty array here, so I did something like this, it would re-render and it would dispatch this action every single time that the component updates. But we don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass an empty array here, right? So that's very important. So now, although we're actually dispatching this fetch products action, we don't actually have access to the products from the Redux store yet. So to do that, as well as importing use dispatch, I'm going to import use selector. And then what we'll be able to do is create a map state function. So I'll say const map state, which is going to equal, and then we'll be able to destructure the products data state, right? And what we want is the products, which we can get from products data dot products, right? So to access this from our Redux store, all we have to do is call the use selector hook, pass it our map state function, and then we'll be able to destructure products from what it returns. Now, although we have access to products, our product state, we need to write the code that will actually handle fetching it. So at the moment, we're only dispatching this action. We're not actually listening for this action. We're not actually running any code to fetch it from the API. So to do that, we need to come back over to our products sagas, and we need to create our new generator functions. So to do that, I'm going to create a new one, which is called export generator function, and we're going to say on fetch products start, right? And all we're going to do is yield take latest. We're going to pass product types dot fetch products start, and again we need to give it the name of the generator function that will be used to actually handle this async code, right? So we'll just call this fetch products, and that's going to, it would take the entire payload, but as there is nothing passed here, we don't need to worry about that. We're just going to pass the name of this generator function here, and we need to remember to export this at the bottom of the file, because that's very important. So as we did before, we need to create a helper function that will actually return a promise. So we need to write the helper function that we're going to use to actually handle this asynchronous request. So to do that, all we're going to do is say export const handle fetch products. It's not going to expect anything, but we are going to return a promise. So we'll say new promise, which is going to take resolve and reject. And then all we're going to do here is we're going to use our Firestore. We're going to target our products collection, and then we need to get a snapshot. We need to get a reference document, right, which we can then use in our success callback. So it's going to take the snapshot, and then what we'll be able to do is create a, and then we want to create a new products array using our snapshot. So to do that, we're simply going to say snapshot, and we're going to map the docs that are on our snapshot. We're going to get each individual document, and then we're simply going to return the data on it. So to do that, we simply say doc.data, which is a method we can call, but this will not include the document's ID, which we need a little bit later in this tutorial. So what we'll do is we'll say document ID, and that is on the actual doc itself, so we'll just say doc ID. And then of course, once we've done that, all we need to do is simply resolve and pass our products array. Cool. Now, if this errored at any point, we want to catch that error, and we are going to use our reject method, call that, and pass the error. Now, as you know, if we come back over to our products sagas, we can use that by using a try catch. So I'm going to catch any errors where I can log that. So I'll just log out the error, but for now I'm going to comment that out. And then we'll be able to use the helper function we just created to fetch the products asynchronously. So at the top of the file where I imported my helpers, I'm going to import the handle fetch products helper function I just created, and we can use that to fetch our products. So we'll say const products equals yield, and we'll call our helper function. And this yield keyword will ensure that we await the response of our helper function. So what I can then do is I can dispatch another event to update our products state in our Redux store with the value that we get back from the API. So to do that, I'll say yield. I'm going to use the put effect, and we need to import the action that we created to update our products state. So we can import that from our products action, and that was called set products, and you can see this in the file. So we created set products it expects the products array, and it just gives that to our reducer with our products. So all we need to do, now we've imported set products, is dispatch this action with the value of our products array. Right, so now let's come back over to the browser and let's head over to our admin page. And you can see, because of our logger middleware, when the component mounted, we dispatched fetch products start, and then we dispatched set products. And if we looked at our state and our products data and our products, you can see here that we have successfully fetched the product that we added to our collection earlier in this tutorial. So you can see here we're now fetching products successfully, right? So let's come back over to our component. So as you guys already know, we have access to products in our admin page component. And now that we are fetching the products, we're ready to render them out on the page. So what I'm going to do is I want to render my products here. So I'm going to create a new div. I'm going to give this a class of manage products. And we're going to map our data here, our products data, in a table. So we're going to have table. We need to set a T body with a table row and a table heading. And this is just going to be a H1. And I'm going to just set this to be manage products. We're going to add another table row, and this is going to contain the data that we need to map, right? So this is actually going to contain a table data cell, but then I'm going to create another table inside of this. So we'll need to create another T body, a table row with a table data. But of course, this is where I want to map it. So I'm going to map each row, which will be the container for each one of my products. So what we'll do is we'll say products.map. We're going to get the product and the index position, right? And then what we want to do is we want to simply return our table row with our table data, and this is where we're actually going to build out our actual items, right? So to do that, we need to get the data from the product, the current product, and what we want to get back is going to be the product name, the product thumbnail, and the product price. And then where we actually want to render this, the first thing that we want to do is we want to have an image. So I'm going to have an image here, and the source of the image is going to be product thumbnail. We're going to have another table data here, which is just going to contain the product name. And we're going to have another one here, which is going to be for our price. And I'm going to add like a $sign here. Okay, so that looks pretty good, but I do want to apply some styling to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my style sheet for my admin page, and I want to target this manage products class that I've applied to the wrapper. And what I want to target, first of all, is the table, right? The table itself, and the table rows. And what I want to do is for each even row, right, which I can target using the nth child even, I want to change the background color to something like D3, D3, D3. which is just a nice light gray. And then finally, I just want to target that thumbnail, and I want to make sure that it doesn't break the layout. So I'm going to enforce a width of 150 pixels, which for me is 15.0 rem. And I'm just going to remove any margin that might be on that too. And finally, I'm just going to add a margin as well to my H1. Within this wrapper, I'm just going to add a margin top of something like 15 pixels. Right? So that's pretty cool. The last thing I want to do is on the actual table here, my tables, I want to define some attributes. So the first thing is going to be a border of 0, the cell padding of 0, and cell spacing of 0. And I want to do the same for my other nested table, right? But I actually want to add some padding of about 10 pixels. So what I'll now do is come back over to the browser and see how this looks. So if I head over to my admin, you'll see that we're now fetching products, which looks great. And we are actually showing them out on the page too. Okay, so before we move on, I just want to touch on the user experience. So currently, if we add a product, so let's just say we add another bag here. We can select women's, I'll enter an image URL, and we'll set the price to like, I don't know, 15 pounds. And if I add the product, right, so what's currently happening is not what I want to happen. So I clicked on add product, but the form didn't close, and I didn't, and that new product hasn't appeared in my admin, right? So that's what I think should happen. If we look at our products collection, you'll see that the product I just added has actually indeed been created. What should happen is we should reset the form, we should close it, and we should then fetch and automatically see that product added to manage products. So let's see how we can implement that in the code, because it's actually going to be pretty easy to do that. So the first thing we want to do is come back over to our admin component. And as you can see, this is where we dispatch our add product start action. We need to create a new function here, which is going to be called reset form, right? And we're just going to reset all of our state back to the default values. So the first thing we'll do is we'll call set product category, and we're going to default this back to men's. We're going to call set product name. We're going to default that back to an empty string. We're going to default the product thumbnail again back to an empty string, and we'll default the price again back to 0. And of course, we also want to close the pop-up, so I'll default that state back to true as well, right? So let's just make sure we're adding our semicolons. And then what we'll do is where we dispatch this action, after it's been dispatched, we're going to immediately reset the form, which will also close the form. Now, what I also want to have happen, and I'll just show you, now I'm just going to show you what this does in the browser. So let's come back over. So let's come back over to our manage products, and let's come to our add product form. So let's just call this something like a red bag, and enter a URL, again, I don't know, 15 pounds, whatever, and let's add the product. You'll see that now we're actually toggling the form, so the values have all been reset, and the form also closed. But we still haven't gone and fetched that additional product. So how can we do that? Well, it's going to be really easy. All we need to do is come back over to our products sagas. And as you know, we have this add product generator function. This is where we actually add the product to our database. So what we need to do is dispatch an action after this event, which will tell Redux to go and fetch the products again, right? So what we'll do is we'll simply import at the top here, where we import our set products action. We need to import fetch products start, right? And again, this doesn't expect anything. If we look at this action, fetch product start, it doesn't do anything but return an action with a type. So within, again, our add product generator function, under our helper function here, we're going to yield, use the put effect, and we're simply going to dispatch fetch product start. And the rest is going to be taken care of for us by the code we've already written. So now let's come back over to our admin, and let's now add another product. So let's just say this is a blue bag, and we need to enter another thumbnail. Let's add a price, and now let's add product, and you'll see that now the bag is fetched, the product is fetched immediately from the backend. I just want to update the styling of the table slightly. So previously I was targeting every even row and adding a background color. And because I have a parent table around my results with a table row, it happens to be that this second table row, which is even, contains the entire results table, which is adding a background color to everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to target the results table specifically. So if I come back now and around my results table, I'm going to add a class which is just going to be results. And if I come back over to the browser and go to my admin page, you'll see that the styling being applied is much more accurate to what I intended. Okay, so at this point we have added the functionality to enable an admin to add products to our database. But I want to add an additional feature that will allow them to delete products as well. So to do that, we need to create a new type. So let's come back over to our code. Let's head over to our products types. And we need to create another type, which is going to be delete product start, right? And again, this is going to have the same value as the name of the key. And we need to create a corresponding action for that. So let's create that action. We're going to call this action export const on delete product start. It's going to take the product ID and it's going to return a simple action with a type and payload. So the type is going to be products types dot delete product start, and the payload is simply going to be the product ID itself. So we can use this action, right, within our admin page component. So we're already importing the button component that we created previously. I'm going to add another table data cell to my table row. So we'll say table data. We're going to add a new button component here. And we'll just say delete. And we'll have an on-click event, right? And what this will do is it will call dispatch. And we're going to dispatch the action directly. So I import the actions here. So I'll say delete product start. And then on the on-click event, we'll simply dispatch this action. But again, we need to get something from the product. We need to get the document ID, right? And pass that to the action. Page in the browser, you'll see each one of these now has a delete button on this item row. But this is currently not doing anything. We need to come and create the sagas for it. So let's come over to our products sagas. And I'm just going to collapse all of these to make it a bit easier for us to work with. The first thing we're going to do is create our start saga. So we'll say export generator function on delete product start. Okay, and again, it's just going to yield take latest. We'll say products types dot delete product start, and we need to give it the generator function that will handle this asynchronously. So we'll say export function, it's a generator function, delete product, and that will receive the entire payload, well, the entire action. We're going to destructure the payload and the document ID. And then we simply pass delete product here. And we need to remember to export this at the bottom of the file. So we're now ready to write the asynchronous code that's going to actually handle this. So we're going to insert this into a try catch. So we're going to catch the error and we can console log it out. But for now, I'm not going to do anything with the error. And again, as I explained previously, we're going to need to create a helper function that we can use within this generator function. So let's come over to our helper file. This is where we write all of our helper functions. And what I want to do is write this function. So it's going to be export const handle delete product. And it's just going to take the document ID and it's going to return a promise. So we'll say return new promise, which will take resolve and reject. And the first thing we need to do is call our Firestore. We need to find the collection for products. And then we need to find the document itself using the document ID that we have passed. And then we're going to attempt to delete the document directly. Now, if this is successful, then what we're going to do is we're simply going to call resolve. But if it fails, we're going to catch the error and we're going to call reject and pass the error to reject. So now that we have created our helper function, we can come back over to our sagas. We need to import that helper function at the top of the file. And what we want to do is we want to simply attempt to delete this by calling yield handle delete product. That's our helper function, and pass it the document ID that we destructured from the payload. Now, if this has succeeded, we're then going to update our Redux products state. So to do that, the same way that we did previously, we're going to dispatch another action, which is fetch products start. It does not expect anything, so we don't need to pass anything. It's a simple action. And that will update the page by refetching the products without the product that we have removed. Right, so it's not actually deleting these. So I think I might have made a mistake in the code. So I'm just going to check my action. Okay. And so the mistake I made is that the product ID is actually stored directly in the payload. It's not an object. So if I look at my Saga here, I was trying to destructure the document object from the payload, but the payload actually is the document object. So in actuality, what I need to do is pass the payload here to the helper function, because that actually is the document ID. I also seem to have forgotten the yield keyword here. That's very important. So we'll need to remember to do both of those things. Now let's come back over to the browser, head back to my admin page. Let's try and delete something. And as you can see, we're now able to successfully delete products. And that brings us to the end of this video tutorial. But before I sign off, I just want to remind you guys that I'm going to be putting a direct link to in the description of this video to the official GitHub repository for this project. I do create PRs at the end of each of these tutorials, so you will be able to find all the code that I've written in this repository. Of course, I have the official playlist for this series, but I do want to ask you guys to please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.